have one committee meeting on our agenda, building and planning. We have a number of items to cover within the building and planning. Somebody's microphone is on and it's echoing. I'm out.
Or their speaker.
Commissioner Zella.
I'm good. I am following instructions, President Bernheim. I'm muted. My speaker's at 0, and I'm listening to you.
All right. Novelty all the way around. But before we begin, I sort of feel compelled to acknowledge something. On Saturday, there was a memorial service for fallen firefighter John DeMuynck. And for those of us who were in attendance in this board, I know myself, Vice President Gavin, Commissioner Grimes, Commissioner McComb, Commissioner O'Neill, and Commissioner McKeon, our township manager, our township secretary. And I have no doubt that the others, if they were able to do so, would have been present. But for those of us who were there, I think we would all agree, it may have been one of the most emotional and moving experiences, at least I can tell you, in my lifetime. And there were a number of people who were responsible for putting this together. And it could not have been done with more dignity and style and grace by anybody, anywhere, and at any time. There were at least 500 firefighters and EMS and police from the surrounding area that came to participate. And I almost feel compelled, if I could, to name them all and thank them all personally. And I know that there had to be a lot of individuals who were involved in putting this together. And I apologize to them, but I'm just going to note our own Chief Fire Officer and the Chief of the Penguin Fire Company, Chaz McGarvey and Ted Schmid. They were beyond spectacular in what they did and what they said, and the strength that they showed in the course of doing this. And it had to be beyond difficult for them, for each at some point had indicated, I know not just to myself, to others, that it was their worst nightmare. But if I may just to point out with an example, and I'm willing to bet that Commissioner McComb knows exactly where I'm going with this. The service was at the Lower Marion High School and at the auditorium. We were in the front row and the family was not too far from us. And Chief Schmid went over to the wife of firefighter DeMuynck, because she was going to go speak shortly once the service started. And he got down on his knee, took her hand, and you could see him trying to give her words of confidence and strength. And you could just, sense as he was trying to build her up, because she ended up speaking so beautifully and let us know about her husband who she had lost. And as Chief Schmid got up, he then walked back towards the stage, and he was probably about 3 to 5 feet in front of Commissioner McComb and I. And we watched as the tear rolled down his eyes, and he just gently pushed it away. I will tell you, throughout that service, there wasn't a dry eye in the house of all of these rough and tough firemen, police, and EMT guys. And it's not a thank you. I know that Chief McGarvey and Chief Schmid wouldn't want to thank you, but they deserve an acknowledgement, as do all the others that participated in it. It made, as somebody else said to me, to be part of this in Lower Marion, it made us proud and in the most trying and difficult circumstances. So an acknowledgement to all of them, and I see some others that were here, and I'm sure they would share my view on that. So with that, we will now turn to our business at hand, and the building and planning. And I know Commissioner Grimes, recognizing you after that, may put you in a little bit of a difficult position, but you can handle it.
Thank you very much. And let me just say thank you for those words, which I agree. I think we all share, would have said similar things. But also we should recognize the sacrifice that our firefighters make every day, the volunteers and the others. And this was an unfortunate reminder of that, of what they do. So in any event, now on to building and planning. The first item is the authorization to release funds held in escrow. Before I make the motion, are there any commissioners who would like to take any of these off of the list? Okay, seeing none. I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the release of funds held in escrow as improvement guarantees in accordance with Section 135-5 of the Township Code for the following: 100 Coulter Square, Suburban Square escrow release number 2 for $356,419. 230 Pennswood Road, Church of the Redeemer, escrow release number 2 for $358,139. 1344 Montgomery Avenue, Holy Child School at Rosemont, escrow release number 2 for $194,389. 100 St. George's Road, escrow release number 11 for $22,404. 1400 Waverly Road, Waverly Heights Amendment Plan, escrow release number 4 for $48,737. 130 South Bryn Mawr Avenue, Bryn Mawr Hospital Master Plan, escrow release number 10 for $86,109. And 1632 Old Gulf Road, Thistle Green Development, escrow release number 7 for $16,614. Is there a second? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, President. Commissioner McComb. Or any commissioner comment on any of these? Is there any public comment on this? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. And raise your hand for anyone who's virtual. Any opposed? The ayes have it. It seems unanimous. Before we move on, I should have mentioned before that there are 2 items on the agenda that have been tabled tonight. This would be number 7 on the agenda, 21 and 25 Rock Hill Road in Ballackinwood, and number 8, the 3 Elmwood Avenue matter. Both of those were tabled and will not be heard tonight. So if anyone is here for those in person or virtually, we will not be discussing those tonight.
Commissioner Grimes, can I interrupt with a
Please.
question on that? And maybe our Director of Building and Planning can address this when he comes up. But why are we discussing at any time Elmwood Avenue, since a 1/4 acre is in Lower Merion, and on other properties where it's split between 2 municipalities, like Haverford School, one municipality or the other takes control of land development. That's how it's done at Haverford School. Why don't we give this all to Narberth to make the land development decision?
To be frank, I think it was in our interest for the township to participate in this. Through township participation, the density is projects. In this case, township really has more staff versus working on this project. I think it's overall for the community to be able to offer that to it. I thought it was important for us to insert ourselves into that, make this a better project.
That is very helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. So we're okay. All right. We will now move on to number 2 on the agenda on page 27 for those of you who have the packet. This concerns waiver of township code provisions regulating open containers for hosting an expanded beer garden in Schauffele Plaza, Station Avenue, and Coulter Avenue during the Ardmore bike race. Is there someone who is, oh, okay. Go ahead.
Good evening. This is an annual event that, like many things, last year was not held due to the pandemic. So this year it is on again. Narberth Ambulance is partnering with the Ardmore Music Hall in order to expand musical entertainment as well as the beer gardens in order to
Eric, you just didn't introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Eric Pearson, the Economic Development Specialist.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
So they're expanding the area.
Jody, did you want him to go over there?
No, this is fine. The mic wasn't on.
They're expanding the area in order to increase attendance and also increase the fundraising opportunities. They are having the beer garden at Schauffele Plaza that will go from 12 to 4:15 approximately, includes with the bike race, but they will also have 2 other ones that will go up until 8 p.m., start at noon, go to 8 p.m., that are connected by Anderson Avenue, Station Avenue, Anderson Avenue, and Coulter Avenue with another beer garden at Station Avenue and one on private property down at the Suburban Square. It's also held on a Saturday. It's also held on a Saturday this year as opposed to a Sunday because there's no other races to conflict. So that's the other minor change.
Thank you. While Eric is up here, are there any commissioner questions for Eric or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move. Thank you. I'm going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of waiver of township code. What's that?
Churchill.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just had a quick question. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. Did we vote or did we, every time someone brings up open container, we had at least discussed that to allow staff to make these decisions rather than the Board of Commissioners. Am I correct in this?
We voted to have the library board make the decision for the libraries.
Okay, just that? Okay.
Commissioner Durbin is correct. The others still need to come on board, but your point may be something we want to consider in the future.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. I was just seeing if anyone wanted to comment on that. That's fine. Are there any other commissioner questions or comments? I'm looking on. Oh, Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. I just wanted to give a comment. I think this is a great idea. I'm excited to see expansion of this event for raising funds for Narberth Ambulance, and not to mention, should I wait for? Oh, okay.
Would you like to make a motion?
Oh, you made a motion and we seconded it.
Didn't realize that Commissioner Churchill had a question. I can make it, or you can make it if you'd like.
I'll second you.
Thank you. All right, I will then move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a waiver of Township Code 111-4.2 as requested by the applicant Ardmore Music Hall to permit patrons to possess open containers with alcoholic beverages and serve alcoholic beverages in public rights of way within regulated areas on August 21, 2021, between the hours of noon to 8 p.m., subject to AMH providing required insurance certificate documenting adequate coverage as required by the town.
Second.
Thank you for the second. Okay. Was there more you wanted to add?
Sure. I'm excited to see the expansion of this event. I'm also excited to see this event return. It was unfortunate that we couldn't do it last year. In some ways, this is almost like a symbolic welcome back to Ardmore for the community. I think it's great. It's going to be outside and safe. And I hope that this is the beginning of another annual tradition in Ardmore. So thank you guys for doing this.
Commissioner Stevenson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just and the team for doing this. Extremely excited that it will be mostly in my neighbor's ward this year, and I look forward to visiting them over there. But we do appreciate all the work they've done.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevenson. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Is there any public comment on this matter? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please say aye, and online raise your hands.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the matter carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item is on page 31, and I'm just going to go ahead and make a motion. I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a waiver of Township Code 111-42 as requested by the applicant Ardmore Initiative to permit patrons to possess open containers with alcoholic beverages and serve alcoholic beverages in public rights of way within a regulated area in Schauffele Plaza and a portion of Cricket Terrace on September 25, 2021, between the hours of 2 and 8, with a rain date of September 26, between the hours of 2 and 8, subject to Ardmore Initiative providing the required insurance certificate documenting adequate coverage as required by the township. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Courtney. Okay, this is for Oktoberfest hosted by Ardmore Initiative. Are there any comments you would like to add to this one?
That it's another welcome back event for Ardmore, and that the only inclusion was this year they've requested a rain date. In other words, it's the same footprint as years past.
Okay, great, thank you. Any commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Courtney?
I'm tempted to give the exact same speech. It's another great event. It's going to be a fun August and September in Ardmore. I'm excited to see lots of community events, and thank you to the Ardmore Initiative for putting this one on.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevenson?
Trying to out-talk Mr. Courtney tonight. I just want to also thank Ardmore Initiative for all the work they continue to do as partners in our community. This Oktoberfest is a great part about Ardmore, but it's just one piece that they do. So thank you for your continued support of our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this matter?
Ms. Durbin has comments.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anna, go ahead.
Well, I can't be one of the Ardmore commissioners that doesn't say, yes, this is great, and what they said.
Thank you very much. Anyone else online, commissioners online? Seeing none. Okay. Was there any public comment? Seeing none. Okay, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. And if you're online, raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm sorry, Commissioner Zelov, you were.
I was trying to both raise my hand here and online, so I had to.
Oh, okay, but that was an aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item, this is on page 35 on your agenda. This is a resolution to support the request for grant funds from the Commonwealth Financing Authority to construct bicycle and pedestrian improvements along East Levering Mill Road. Pierce.
Yes, this is actually similar to a grant that was brought forward earlier this year for that amount, but we were unfortunate with getting that from Montgomery County. So this is an opportunity with DCED and their Commonwealth Financing Authority to apply under that program in order to try to get the $200,000 for East Levering Mill improvements between Contract and State Road and Belmont Avenue.
Thank you. Any commissioner questions or comments on this one?
Quick comment.
Please,
just to support this resolution. It's an important project. The safety of pedestrians and bicyclists on East Levering Mill is important to the community. We should support.
McComb, any chance you'd like to make a motion?
I'll second your motion, Chairman Grimes.
Seconded.
What's that?
I wanted to
okay,
second
I'm
it.
happy to do
One
the
of you make
motion.
it.
I'm trying to spread it around a little. I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution supporting the request for $200,000 in grant funds from the Multimodal Transportation Fund of the Commonwealth Financing Authority to construct bicycle and pedestrian improvements along East Levering Mill Road in Ballackinwood within the town, with the township providing matching funds of at least 30% of the total project cost.
Seconded.
Thank you, Commissioner McComb. Is there any public comment on this matter? Any other commissioner comments? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. And if you're online, raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next is on page 39. This is three certificates of appropriateness applications. Are there any commissioners who wish to take any of them off of the motion that I'm about to make for all three of them? Seeing none, I will recommend to the Board of Commissioners action on the following certificates of appropriateness as recommended by the Historical Architectural Review Board at their meeting held on July 6, 2021. 24 West Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District 21-14, approval of vinyl window graphics applied to Lancaster Avenue storefront windows in compliance with Secretary of the Interior Standard 9. 6 West Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District 21-15, approval of the installation of a projecting blade sign at the Cricket Avenue entrance in compliance with Secretary of the Interior Standard 9. And 1115 Youngsford Road, Gladwin Historic District 21-19, approval to install a fence and motorized driveway gate along the front elevation of the property in compliance with Secretary of the Interior Standards 9. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Are there any commissioner questions or comments on any of these? See none. Is there any public comment on any of these? Seeing none, we will call the vote. All those in favor say aye. Raise your
Aye.
hand online. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. Gonna keep talking fast since we're on a roll here. Next is on page 51 of our agenda. There are two items. These are historical commission applications. Are there any commissioners who would like to take either of these for individual consideration? I see none, so I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following applications as recommended by the Historical Commission at their meeting on June 28, 2021. 423 Dove Lake Road, Gladwin, Class 2, amendment of previously approved alterations to the residence as set forth in our materials, and 101 Linwood Road, Ardmore, Class 2, installation of new garage doors with the applicant providing additional information on the proposed door and hardware and existing jambs and heads for review by a subcommittee in compliance with Secretary of the Interior Standards 9 and 10. Are there any commissioner questions or comments on either application? Seeing none, is there any public comment on either of these? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hands online. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next matter is on page, well, the next two have been tabled. The next is the conditional use plan and the preliminary land development plan for 104, 108, 114, 120, 124, 130, 150, and 198 West Lancaster Avenue in Ardmore. These are two different matters, the conditional use plan and the preliminary land development plan, but we are going to have a presentation presumably that covers both of them, both matters at once, and we will have discussion together, and then we will take individual votes on the conditional use plan and then the preliminary land development plan. So, Mr. Leswin.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. This is exactly how we're going to proceed tonight. This is preliminary land development plan for what's become known as the Piazza project. And this is a project that is better known by its street instead of its individual address. It's, as you can see on the screen, hopefully everybody can see the screen I have. Double checking to make sure that my screen is being shared. There we go. So this project is located on Lancaster Avenue. It's between Greenfield Avenue, Ardmore Avenue, and back at the bottom of it is West Athens Avenue. It currently encompasses two Piazza auto dealerships, the Acura dealership and the Volkswagen dealership, and then also the IHOP. And then on the corner of Ardmore Avenue and West Lancaster Avenue is a township parking lot. What's being proposed tonight is preliminary land development.
You're back.
Yeah. Can you help me take time out?
That's not enough.
Before we go to commercial while she's fixing it up.
There. Audio is better in here than best.
There we go.
There we go. We didn't miss much. So this is the preliminary land development plan, and many members of the board are very familiar with the plan. It's been around for about a year and a half. A year ago, the applicant came forward during the pandemic over Zoom and received a tentative sketch plan approval for this plan. 6 months prior to that, the applicant had begun a very lengthy public education campaign, working with the neighboring civic associations, the Business Improvement District, and the Township Planning Commission to educate the community about this project. It's a large, significant project in the heart of Ardmore. And what's proposed is the clean and scrape of the entire site. All the buildings are going to be demolished, and then they're going to be consolidated. All these different parcels will be consolidated together into a very large single parcel. And then there's going to be construction of a 5-story mixed-use building that includes about 70,000 square feet of retail space, 279 apartments, 615 parking spaces. The applicant is also seeking approval with an option to add approximately 90 additional parking spaces in a third underground level. What's proposed in this project is 2 underground levels of parking. They'll be investigating the site during final plan, making some borings, seeing if they can actually feasible to do it, but they may drill down even further to a third level and be able to put another 90 spaces underneath. Another important aspect of this plan is the extension of West Athens Avenue. West Athens Avenue is where the post office is located. Currently, it's a little stub street. As part of this project, the applicant will be extending West Athens Avenue straight through to Greenfield Avenue, creating a complete development block. This will improve circulation through Ardmore and circulation to the site. Part of that extension of Athens Avenue required a lot line change with its neighboring park, the neighboring shopping center. We're all familiar with that large parking lot that's opposite the Greenfield Shopping Center. There's going to be an adjustment to the lines of this. And what we made sure with this subdivision is that both properties are in compliance with zoning going forward. But on the screen, I have the illustrative site plan that shows the building and the greening on the site. On the bottom is the West Athens Avenue extension. And you can see that the buildings are close to the street as what's desired by our commercial zoning, to move the buildings up to the street to create a traditional Main Street sort of environment. But they're also set back enough to create wide sidewalks and areas for street trees. This is another one of those things that we wanted to get out of our commercial areas. We wanted to have them comfortable, pedestrian friendly, and green, with a lot of glass at the storefront, at the streetscape, to allow views in and out of storefront. The buildings will read as while this looks like one large building, it's designed to read as a series of smaller buildings that have developed over time. The applicants here, and if the commissioners are interested, they have a series of their architecture and they can take you through that. I'm going to take you through really tonight the overall site plan approval, but you could see that this is going to read as something that looks like the rest of Ardmore that has developed over time. Series of small buildings, traditional streetscape, street trees, and then areas for residential on top. The building's broken up into a series of different retail spaces. On the western corner of the property is proposed to be a larger grocer, is what's been indicated to staff and to the community. And that'll be a large single-use building that's taken in place. And then there'll be a series of other smaller retail spaces along Lancaster Avenue. In the middle, there's access to the site. And what we've seen between tentative sketch and preliminary plan is that this area has been refined significantly. This was an area that commissioners spent a lot of time on your discussions of how the circulation was going to come in and out of the site to make sure that there's space for gathering. The applicant has cut the building back and expanded that gathering space in front of the building here to the east to allow more public gathering, circulation through the site, and to make that more of a festive area along Lancaster Avenue. The building wraps along Ardmore Avenue, and then the area along the back, what we're referring to the back, which is West Athens Avenue, has building, but it also has all of the service facilities. It has access to the residential parking, access to the commercial parking, and then access to the loading dock. You have to have loading docks on a site like that. But the loading docks are all internalized. That means is that trucks will come in and then a door will shut behind them, that there won't be open-ended tractor trailers unloading, serve the other uses. In the center of this building, while it reads as one building, one of the concerns from the community and from staff and from the planning commission was having to walk all the way around the block. As we know, we walk through Ardmore, there are a series of little alleyways. You can kind of cut through little areas to get from one end of Ardmore to the other. What the applicant has done is create a pedestrian access through the building that you can see from one end of the building to the other that allows someone to access from Athens Avenue up to Lancaster Avenue. This facilitates more of a small town feel you walk through the site. This is just an image of the additional parking module that would be down, that could potentially be at the bottom of the site. This would be in the middle of the parking lot, middle of the site. I put this slide up here just to reiterate how many community meetings have been done. This is probably an example of the most community participation of any land development that I can recall. And I want to give Commissioner Stevenson a lot of credit for this, that he's really taken the lead above and beyond what staff could do by working with the community, working with the developer to reach out to many of the smaller groups that had their own individual issues. As people approach this project, because it's been so large, different people have approached it with different concerns. We've had a lot of input from the Shade Tree, had a lot of input from the Ardmore Progressive Civic Association. We've had a lot of input from residents along Ardmore Avenue. All of that has needed time to take place, and it's been a series of meetings. Those ideas and those concerns memorialized in the conditions of approval that are before you tonight, which the vast majority, they're all acceptable to the condition. I will read in a couple of minor modifications. There are a series of conditions, and I'll just go through those, that the applicant will be continuing to work with staff between now and when the plan is recorded on a couple of detail items. One of them is to add a median along Lancaster Avenue. I think we're all very aware of anybody who's lived in Lower Merion Township that there's a habit of, while we might put up signs to tell people not to pull into an area, you really do need to take the road away. And prohibit left turns in and out of this project. What staff is proposing is a median along Lancaster Avenue. We've seen many examples of areas where there's a lot of signage, but this would actually physically prevent cars from turning left. The reason we don't want the left turns is the left turns add congestion to Lancaster Avenue. People are trying to get through Lancaster Avenue. All of those additional turning movements slow down traffic getting through Lancaster Avenue. The median will help to, it helps to calm traffic a little bit by narrowing the roadway, but it also removes congestion of the unnecessary turning movement. But this requires staff to be working with the applicant and PennDOT on the final design of that. There's also a series of pedestrian improvements that have been added around the perimeter of this site. The first and most important of these is at the intersection of Athens Avenue and Ardmore Avenue. The Ardmore house is across the street. Very early on in the process, residents came out and stated that, well, it'd be great if a supermarket and a restaurant was a part of this new development. They'd be happy for that, but they couldn't get there. They don't feel safe crossing Ardmore Avenue. So what's been proposed by the applicant in response to this is a couple of bump outs right in front of the Ardmore post office. These will help to neck down traffic, and with the also with the crosswalks, allowing a safer pedestrian connection. Now there's a post-development study that's required for this, and this very well may come up with a stop sign as well, but we'll be looking at that afterwards to make sure that this has proper flow for pedestrians and for automobiles going down Athens Avenue. And all of the crosswalks will be high visibility, and we'll be putting pedestrian safety first to be able to access this important development. Also at the other end of the development, where the new Athens Avenue, it's Greenfield Avenue. If anybody's ever gone to that shopping center parked across the street, sometimes it's like playing Frogger. There's a long straightaway coming from Lancaster Avenue down into Ardmore, and cars get a really good run. We're looking at adding another crosswalk here, maybe a stop sign. There's some other elements to this to improve pedestrian safety for people coming here. While there's going to be a lot of parking, ideally it'd be great if people in the Ardmore area could walk or bike to this area. Another one of these areas that's also going to be improved, the intersection of Lancaster Avenue and Greenfield Avenue. We talk a lot about pedestrian mobility in township, and if anybody's ever walked to this intersection, the western end has a big sign that says no pedestrian. Working with PennDOT and the applicant, we're going to be looking to add a better crosswalk here so all four corners of this are walkable to really improve connectivity. And this will certainly help get people from North Ardmore coming into the site across Lancaster Avenue. Last week, we spent several hours talking about transportation demand management, and here's those principles in application. The applicant currently has 2 bus stops in front of their site. They've agreed to add bus shelters in front of that. This will be a significant upgrade in the Ardmore area for people using buses. And it'll be a nice design element with the other streetscape elements of benches, bike racks, lights, trees, to really make a coherent, modern sort of appearance to the front of this building. I mentioned earlier that the interior walkway that'll run from Lancaster Avenue to the Athens Avenue extension. This application has a tremendous amount of stormwater. I will admit that I am absolutely surprised to be standing here tonight, not indicating that relief is requested by the applicant for stormwater. I'm going to give my hats off to their engineers for being able to figure out how to do that. But as we know, this is a completely paved site with no stormwater management. This is a very large site that will now have a tremendous amount of stormwater management as a result of the redevelopment. The stormwater management is proposed primarily in that bottom corner by where the new Athens Avenue extension hits Greenfield Avenue. And we have several conditions in here that the applicant will continue to work with staff on refining all of these details that are important to the community, how we all experience. When this gets built, it's an economic project, residents is going to have a lot, but most of us are going to experience it by walking in front of it. Those details mean a lot. I'm joined here by the township engineer, but I also have a couple other members of staff, Julian Dirk and Charlie Doyle, and we have been sweating those details. And the applicant has been sweating those details. They're committed to getting this right too. So you'll see a number of these conditions that say the applicant will work with staff. It's not because they're trying to avoid it, it's because we're still trying to make sure we get it right. And these are all important. That's what really makes this a home run. So there's a lot of the concern about this was about landscaping and greening. The applicant is asking for a partial waiver of the natural features code to provide 30 trees off site. And I wanted to explain why that's necessary. As you can see by the illustration I have in front of you, there's a lot of building. The MUS ordinance encourages building on a site. It's an urban environment. It's a downtown. That lot coverage could sometimes equal 90 to 100% in some cases. The township's natural features code requires landscaping, but it's really oriented for single family homes where you're going to have 30% lot coverage. That creates almost an unusual expectation of where would you put all of those trees. Well, the applicant's been working with staff, and what they've done is they've been trying to meet the natural features code requirement by meeting the township's greening standards. Greening standards were introduced with Bryn Mawr Village, and they've been carried over to City Avenue, and they're more appropriate for these sort of downtown environments, where you're not just thinking of putting in a couple shrubs and a couple trees, you're trying to really green a space, make it feel comfortable and lush. And what the applicant has done is been able to convert some of those trees, shrubs, perennials, fill in all of these spaces with much more layered landscape that's appropriate to this type of development. In this, the applicant has exceeded really what's required by the township. But they've also agreed to provide 30 trees off-site that can be utilized by the Shade Tree Commission or local civic associations in and around this, the Ardmore area to extend that planting into the neighborhood. That seemed like a win-win to everyone. We're very pleased with how that's been coming out, and staff supports that waiver. And you can see these are the areas at the street level where the green is proposed. There's a very significant verge around this property that'll be greened up. It includes all of the street trees. The species are all approved by the Shade Tree Commission. There's a lot of shrubs and a lot of layers to take some of this building, particularly on the corner here where Athens Avenue meets Greenfield, and to soften this area where the building gets a little taller and where you might have loading activities. And I just provided, this is just for the board's education. These are just some of the standards you can see. It's very detailed in our SALDO requirements for greening, and how the applicant went through all of these different elements to be able to satisfy these. And I just mentioned the relief and staffs. Now, the application also requires conditional use approval to deviate from the design standard. Lancaster Avenue is a ridge that runs along Ardmore, and properties descend down away from Lancaster Avenue as you go south into Ardmore. When One Ardmore Place and Cricket Flats came forward for approval, there were standards in the MUST ordinance that required that sill heights at the bottom of the windows that define the streetscape be 2 feet above ground. It's very difficult to do that continuously to look right when you're on a hill. And then must also include standards that require the top of the windows to be level coming down. And that's also hard to do when you're on a hill. There was a relief granted for both of those applications, and what this applicant is doing, they're on the same hill. They're seeking that same relief. Also in the rear of the property, because of the height of the building, and because it extends down and where the first floor is coming off of Lancaster Avenue, they've requested relief to provide less than 50% clear windows in the very back corner where the supermarket is, where the building is highest coming in off of Lancaster Avenue. They went through the conditional use process. Their architect spoke at length, and the hearing officer has recommended that this relief be granted with certain conditions that are in your agenda tonight, and staff supports them. And this is this will clearly illustrate where this element is. The idea is to make the building look correct, and not to have windows follow the grade, but to follow the building itself. This is built into the code, and the hearing officer recommends. With that, I'm happy to answer any of your questions. I do have just 2 minor modifications, conditions of approval. One is for condition number 18. This condition deals with truck turning radiuses. This came up at the Planning Commission, and we just wanted to modify 18B to add in truck or design vehicles as approved by the Township Engineer and Public Works. This is really just to confirm that it's a certain wheelbase for a certain truck going around the intersection of Ardmore Avenue and Lancaster Avenue. When this is getting constructed, we want to make sure that there's significant radius there for the trucks to make that turn. Public Works has identified that hole that's on that corner has been hit. That's usually a sign that the radius is incorrect. This is just to confirm what we would judge that to. Clarification. And this is just to show where that pole is in sight of. And then finally, staff has been going back and forth with the applicant on architecture, and I will say it's made the project a lot better. There's really great dialogue of how to interpret the MUST ordinance to make it better. And there's just one minor suggestion that agreeable to the applicant is that 4A will now read that the applicant shall work with staff to reduce or remove the metal or cementatious panels along the lower stories of the north elevation. This is just a minor thing that'll be worked out during final plan. And that's really the summary of my presentation. I'm happy to answer your questions. The applicants here, they can answer many of your questions. They have a lot. There's been a lot of material generated during the 2 years of this project. They're prepared to answer that.
Great, thanks, Chris. So what I would like to do is, if anyone has any questions for Chris, I'm then, when we're finished with that portion, I'm going to see if the applicant wants to make any brief statement. Does the applicant want to say anything first before question? Okay, I'm getting a yes. Oh no, I'm getting a maybe. So okay, so well, you can think about it for a minute. We'll take questions for Chris, and then I'm going to see if the applicant wants to say anything. If you have questions for the applicant, I suppose, or something for Chris that the applicant can answer better, I suppose the applicant's welcome to come up and share in that answering. So that being said, Commissioner O'Neill, do you want to start off?
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Hi, thank you for the presentation. My question has to do with circulation, and mostly when you mentioned the median on Lancaster Avenue. And that section is a PennDOT roadway, am I correct?
You are correct.
And what I have seen recently in area travels, even on local secondary roads like Haverford Road, their idea of a median are the sticks, orange and white. and they're tall and they're anything but historic. They block any sort of beautiful view of a building, sure. But I guess I'm curious about what do you anticipate that being, and what will be there? Will there be plants, bushes? What will the vegetation be? Are my questions.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
So, and I'll look over, and Joe, please feel free to add in. This is really our first meeting in Ardmore.
Right.
And it took a bit of negotiation with the fire marshal and public works. What we're bringing forward is a cement median. It has to be mountable just in case there's a fire, and so the fire trucks can get over it. It will not be landscaped at this time. There will not be the orange cones that you mentioned before. This will just be simply something that a normal car wouldn't want to drive over. What we would hope to have happen going through the Ardmore master plan is that we could develop larger greening overall in Ardmore, treat this as a corridor going forward, that you would have that, and then find ways to maintain the greening in that. We're not prepared at this time to just jump into the greening. We don't know what that would be, and we certainly wanted to spend some more time with the fire department to make sure that whatever's there, they can get off and they can get across and to safely act.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Commissioner Stevenson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, I want to follow up about the greenery relief piece. Do we have some designated spots for the green relief?
I've been having a lot of conversations with the Shade Tree Commission. There's actually a couple members of the Shade Tree Commission that live in Ardmore. They have I would say a wish list of spots. They don't have a plan done per se, but the plan would be to work with the township arborist to identify a number of spots. Several years ago, we did a similar sort of community tree planting in Ballackinwood, and there was a number of trees. It was coordinated by the Shade Tree Commission and the Neighborhood Club of Ballackinwood. And what happened was members of the Shade Tree Commission, working with the township arborist, identified X amount of spots. And in that, they identified the spots and then checked the feasibility of could a tree actually go in that space. One of the limiting aspects, particularly in Ballackinwood and Ardmore, are utility. There's a lot of wires and a lot of underground things going forward. So we probably identified twice as many spots as we needed and to try to get those in. It's certainly, when I've spoken to the Shade Tree Commission, the members that I've spoken to have been very excited about the opportunity to take the lead on this project.
But, okay, I guess my question, I'm going to skip over that. I could talk about the greenery. I'll circle back that in my comment. The other piece I wanted to talk to you about is about, this is a large project, and I know in the one of the conditions about for workers parking, does the township have a plan about an enforcement plan?
Well, we have a condition of approval in this approval. What the board doesn't see is all of the permits going forward after. There's a lot of administrative actions. So the applicant will be giving us a plan of where they plan on having their workers work or park to come in. They need to provide us an off-site plan. That'll be part of permit process. With that, we would hold them to it. We'd accept their plan and say that this is where you're going to park. In construction projects, if a worker sometimes parks in another location, staff is informed of it, and we work with the superintendent of the site to make them to adjust that. If we're finding that workers are in the neighborhood or parking where they shouldn't be, we direct them out of it. So going in, we have a good plan, and then if it breaks down, we're able to enforce it.
So I will be very transparent that there are members of my community who don't have any faith, and they feel that the parking piece is going to be a major part. This is a major project, and they would like that there is something that is in the condition that is, number one, that is very clear that if this is not followed, that there will be some aggressive enforcement in fines. So I would ask that staff works with them to have something more robust in relationship to if this is violated.
Well, what are
And I apologize. I just want to save you from, so you can answer it once. And the second piece to that is the enforcement, that making sure that we have a plan, that there is, because this is different and our township has great folks who are doing this, this is going to require action in order to make sure that this is. And number one, what's going to be needed is identifying where's that corridor we're talking about. Number two, identifying, what are those constraints about those workers if it's not, and I agree, like when you have your punch meetings to ask them to do it, I agree with that. But if it becomes to a point where we realize that this is problematic, and we have to have something where we are on the township piece saying, we got to enforce this, but enforce it in a way where it makes a difference.
Well, what we've done recently, and I want to thank Commissioner Grimes for this. Commissioner Grimes has been very helpful with us over in Ballackinwood, in that there's currently under construction at the intersection of Rock Hill Road and Belmont Avenue, there's a large assisted living property. Commissioner Grimes has noticed in his travels that there are contractors parking in the Greenwood Trail parking lot. They brought that to our attention once. We brought it the second time. What we've done is gone to the township, we've gone to their superintendent and told them we're going to suspend their operations until they address them. So we're not fining them, but we come at this with a very heavy hand. And with this, and I'm glad we're fleshing this out even more, we're going to be interpreting this not parking in the neighborhood as not parking in Ardmore. But also with all this, we don't have inspectors. The reality of it is we don't have people going inspecting to make sure who's parking on the street. We are going to have to rely on residents. If residents see somebody who's, contractor is pulling up, somebody else is getting in the car and they're driving off, just let us know. We do have it in this part of Ardmore where we have the car dealership. The neighboring Honda dealership, their workers park in the neighborhood. We don't have a condition of approval. They park in the neighborhood, they drop it off, and they park out there. We can't enforce that, but we can enforce it with this app.
I think that's what I'm looking for. And I won't belabor this right now, okay. But we'll have to revisit this because, again, to rely on I don't think it should be the neighbors calling to do this. This is a project that is a major project that is going to, and if it's impeding on the neighborhood, then we have to have a plan as a township in place. And to say to have somebody call when they're going to work, and then they come home, nobody's there at the end. I mean, we need to have a plan.
Well, we'll have a plan that the applicant will have to provide to us where their workers are parking off site.
I mean, no, not them. I'm saying the township has to have an enforcement. And what you've outlined is not a plan. And we have to have that.
If I may, and I apologize for the rude interruption, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we have something in place with one Ardmore where we had a contact person with Mr. Brownoff's office, and that there was something that was in place, because I know in the beginning I was being contacted. And then thereafter we were able to work, with them so that there was removal of workers who were interfering with some of the local businesses. I don't recall the specifics of what we did, but we actually had some proactive plan or program in place in order to mitigate the.
And I think we will work with, this is good, and we can flesh this out, and perhaps I can, offline start to develop this. But I think what we would want to have is a point person on the construction site, but also somebody on staff to be able to have as a point person to be able to do. And we are responsive when we do know this, and if there are problems, most of the time these problems manifest themselves as a repeat, and then they're easy enough to.
Thank you. The next question is about, you did it. Thank you for talking about the walkability. I think that that has been an understatement about the need about walkability and transportation, part of the project a must. But as I sent you earlier, why, we're looking at the traffic study piece and looking at the impact of this, the Montgomery corridor, how can we include that in the conversation? Because as we look at the amount of if we talk about walkability, the amount of residents who live in Montgomery who would egress to use the facilities of the grocery store and the other part would be that piece that becomes one. And then the second piece is how do you factor in with future developments that are like 355 Montgomery, the potential that is in Suburban Square, and the other one I think is 69 Montgomery, which is you're talking about 500 more pieces, which could be 1,000 more people. So how do we make sure that we are factoring this in a way for the future pieces?
The traffic one's relatively straightforward. So the applicant has submitted a traffic study, and we have provisions and conditions in the township engineer's letter that require a post-development traffic study. So that would incorporate any of these developments that start to take place in the process. Because some of these came in first, this was introduced, and then these others kind of came online. So we'll be able to evaluate that all in the end. And if there's adjustments that need to be made to signal timing or stop signs added or other elements to that, that's all part of that project. That's all part of that.
And that also will include to expand it where it is over in the areas of Montgomery.
I think we can do that. The township engineer is aware that we want to catch all of that.
So that's going to be added to the conditional?
It is a condition that's already in. Your conditions of approval include reference of the township engineer's letter. Those conditions of the post-development traffic study are in the township engineer's letter. What we've done is just accepted the entire township engineer's letter instead of adding all those as conditions, or else we'd have 200 or something conditions agenda.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And just with the walkability, I'm not forgetting that. That's an important part. And we did see the public comment today, and we take that very seriously. But you have to realistically understand what the applicant can be expected to do in relationship to their site and what they can do off-site. And I think we pushed the boundaries very well with some improvements around the edges of this. The Ardmore, the Woodside Avenue tunnel is problematic. It's a 150-year-old tunnel built without a sidewalk. It's hard to get from North Ardmore over to South Ardmore. I think it's unrealistic to expect this applicant to fix that, but I think that's why we're going to do a master plan for Ardmore. I will say that all of the public comments that have come through in this process over the last year and a half have been incredibly helpful as we move into an Ardmore master plan, starting to understand better what we need to do.
So just for clarification, I was not asking it in the sense of asking the applicant to be responsible or understanding or asking the township. Is more about ensuring that as we move forward with our conversations about the walkability, understanding that will have an impact. We're talking about residents or encouraging them to use walkability, whether it's streetscape or whatever, on the township. So I just want to clarify, I was not asking for the app, but thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Commissioner Zella.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. A number of questions on this extraordinarily large project. Following up on Commissioner O'Neill's question, is there a condition of approval that outlines size and materials for a median on Lancaster Avenue?
Not size and material. I believe it's more of a general condition outlining the location, and that the applicant will work with staff and the township engineer on those details.
And do you envision a concrete median that can be crossed by large trucks like fire apparatus, but not cars?
Correct.
Okay. Will bus shelters have any impact on the sidewalk? Or are they set back?
And this is a good the applicant can follow up on this, but we've been looking at this from a staff standpoint. We spend a lot of time in the weeds with that street, and that's really where we've been kind of living in that area. We wanted to make sure that there's enough room for street trees, bike racks, all those furnishings. And there's a furnishing area that's right off behind the curb. So the bus shelter will be right off the curb in that area where the street trees would be. So we feel that could be accommodated well. One thing I didn't point out, and there was a lot of discussion attended as sketch, was this application going to have on-street parking or not on-street? What the applicant has proposed is a little bit of both. They're putting on-street parking on the western end of the project, closer to where the supermarket is, where one would expect, where you would need short-term drop-offs. and then not having it on the other side.
I mean, again, the point of my question is, you know, we wouldn't want bus shelter to impact the walkability and the width of the sidewalk to the extent that it makes it difficult to walk.
No, they'll be right out, they'll be set back from the pedestrian way. Good example of this is in Haverford, New
That's
Chase
set
Bank.
back, yes.
So that's set back, and this will
Yes,
be,
set back by the width of the sidewalk.
this will be set
In other words, the
more
width of the
forward.
sidewalk isn't impacted by the bus shelter at the Chase Bank.
Exactly.
And that's what's envisioned here.
It is, except this, instead of being set back, this will be set because the buses load from the curb. Here in Haverford, they're set back. The applicants or the people who are waiting for the bus sit behind the sidewalk. Here they'll be sitting almost on the curb.
You mentioned greening standards, which are in the Bryn Mawr Village Code, but they're not in the must code. So I took a quick look, but I didn't see a condition of approval regarding greening standards. Now, I'm not talking natural features code, I'm talking greening standard. So shouldn't there be a condition about that, or is there one in here?
Even better, it's baked into their plan. Plans that you're approving tonight include pages and pages of greening standards. Very early on, staff approached the applicant and said, we really do need the greening standards as part of this. And they embraced that in their landscape architect here tonight. And if the board was interested in that, she's done a wonderful job in the details. So we've gotten the natural features code standards and the greening standard and the streetscape.
Great, thank you. The revised conditions of approval that you provided for us on one sheet refer to the first one, 4A, yeah, shall work with staff to reduce or remove metal or cementitious panels. So which is it? Reduce or remove? Because reduce isn't much of a, may not be much. Remove is a lot.
Much might not be required. I think in part of this is only a couple spots on the project where you have this. It repeats itself once over in the project. There's multiple goals that are being done here, and the applicant has submitted plans for metal panels, and they've made a very good argument that the metal panels create a greater inset, that create more depth to the facade, which is a good thing. Must encourages that. What staff has suggested is bringing in more of a solid, more masonry sort of panel. The applicant is while they have a very good design, they're at, let's say, the 70% design part. I think we really do. I think we've all agreed as we were arguing this that we kind of need to see their next design iteration to really better understand the implication of this. So it could be a combination of reduce and or replace in both places. We're just giving them some flexibility in the design.
So the architecture of this large project is so important given its scale. And we've seen recent large projects in Ardmore, some of which have very impressive architecture and another one that does not. So what do we need to, if it's only 70% design and here we are, this is the last step in the public process. So how do we have confidence about the quality of the architecture and adherence to the architectural standard?
That's a great question. And if we're talking about two recently constructed projects in Ardmore, I will say that the applicants, architects, are the ones who designed the better one. And that project recently won a Montgomery Award. They're here and they went through that same process with HARB. And in this case, staff has substituted ourselves for HARB in this. And there have been, what you're seeing is the final bit of negotiation between staff and the architect. And we're probably talking about 1% of the overall. But the applicant can make a comment on that with their architect. I'm fairly confident that we've established a very good dialogue with the applicant in making sure that this is done. And is going to be done right. Because I believe that they are as equally committed to making this good architecture as staff. We've gone out and we've looked at both of those projects you just referenced, and we're learning from what didn't work and what does work. They've made a very good point, and I really, just in a conversation today, trying to refine this condition, I can't tell you which one is absolutely right. And I think having some flexibility, we go through that to refine this, I think will come out and it'll come out well in the end.
So do you think we need another condition that addresses architecture or not?
At this point, I don't feel like we need. We put it as many conditions as we could, as you saw. If we needed another condition, we would have brought
You looking for backup?
I gave her last chance to add conditions. She's okay.
With regard to Commissioner Stevenson's question about off-site parking, and then the follow-up, which was having a contact person, as has worked well on other large projects, that should be a condition of approval. So I'd ask staff to prepare that. The sidewalk, which is probably a fairly well-used sidewalk and going to be even more used once the project is completed, but the sidewalk will be not usable for the period of construction. So sidewalks in Ardmore and Bryn Mawr that are not usable during periods of construction make it difficult for pedestrians. And sometimes the signage isn't very good, and sometimes the signs direct pedestrians to crossings that aren't marked or aren't typical. So there are some municipalities where there's scaffolding that's put in place so that sidewalks remain open. We don't require that typically. So my question is, should we require that here, or should we require signage that is inspected by staff and made and designed in such a way that pedestrian movements during construction are safe and practical?
I think that's an excellent question. I'd like to have a little bit of time to talk to other members of the building department about how we achieve that. I think it's something I can report back to the board online, or even report back before the board meeting next. But I think that's going to take a couple different people that I would need to better understand.
Okay.
But I do agree that we could do that better.
Okay, but this is our last chance tonight to talk about this project publicly. So I think there should be a condition of approval that addresses what you just said. Staff working with the developer on safe and practical sidewalk pedestrian movements during period of construction. I mean, we're talking about an entire long block that's going to be out of service for a long period of time.
Good evening. I completely agree that the sidewalks should remain open.
Joe, can you just introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Joe Mastronardo. It's great to be in the room with everybody for the first time after seeing you in little boxes for 18 months. But yeah, I just want to address the issue with the sidewalks, and we share the same concern. But the project is located on 2 state roads. PennDOT will share your concern, and they will require a pedestrian circulation plan to be committed when they're for any work within the right of way. I do think a condition of approval kind of reinforces that, and if we can work with Chris to come up with something that would be acceptable to the
good in the next hour or so.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe less. Let's see. Chris, I think I only have one more question. COA 43 wisely says that the project should incorporate a big belly. Is it clear that the developer will be paying for the big belly and not the township?
It's incorporating it. We're assuming that they're going to pay for it.
Okay, as long as that's clear. Because they're expensive.
Well, but it's a signature project for the developer, and I'm sure that they want to incorporate one of those.
Okay. And looking at my notes, what Commissioner O'Neill referred to as unacceptable medians are called delineators. And if you go to Haverford Road in Haverford Township at County Line, that new medical office building, there are delineators on Haverford Road, and they're missing teeth already, and they look terrible. So that's what we don't want here or anywhere in Lower Merion, in my view. So what we've discussed and you've described, makes sense. Great. Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Why don't we go to Commissioner McComb and then Commissioner Courtney after?
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Just a couple of quick questions, Chris, to follow up on Commissioner Zeloff's question about the median strip. And I know it's not fixed in stone, no pun intended, but I think it's a concrete median strip. And I think Commissioner Zeloff said it would be mountable by trucks, but not cars. And I assume that isn't accurate because you would need to have police vehicles to be able to traverse it, ambulances, and other types of emergency vehicles.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not just trucks. And I assume it would be something comparable to what was just installed on City Avenue, which I think is working pretty effectively.
I believe it'd be a little more accessible than what's on City Avenue.
Okay. The second question has to do with the request for relief from the Natural Features Code and these circumstances. It seems appropriate. One of the issues the township has struggled with is planting trees on Lancaster Avenue because it's a state highway. But my recollection from the Shade Tree Commission is that the Ardmore business district owners did some planning many years ago, and I think they have come back to the Shade Tree Commission periodically requesting trees or something. So that would be another entity to work with Shade Tree Commission because there's an interest in doing it. And I think they have locations that don't run afoul of, the township and PennDOT's understanding as planning on Lancaster. So that's good. That would seem to be an appropriate way to pursue it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I too want to talk about the Natural Features Code waiver. Could you repeat what you said about in your presentation as to why the current Natural Features Code doesn't apply here or is not appropriate here?
The Natural Features Code was developed back in the late 1980s when the township was undergoing a lot of breakup of larger properties in the western part of the township. And the township was seeing a lot of estates turned into subdivision. The impervious surface for those residential properties is somewhere around 30. So that the landscape requirements to put a lot of landscaping on the site assume that 70% of the property would be available to plant. The must ordinance is somewhat the opposite of that to the extreme, in that must allows almost 100% lot coverage. It just precludes spaces to put the trees. And talking over the years with the township solicitor, it's impractical when the legislative body has designated that a certain amount of density can take place. You've said that should happen, and then you should be able to fit the trees around that best of your ability. It's just physically impossible to plant 70% trees when you have 2% impervious instead of 70%. But to that, what the applicant has done is instead taken that amount of plant material that would normally be trees and then some shrubs and provided that for the Natural Features Code, and then above and beyond that provided greening standards of that. And they've translated a number of those trees into additional layers of landscape, of ornamental grasses, shrubs, perennials that aren't even required in the Natural Features Code that are more appropriate in this setting. Where in the western part of the township, when you're seeing a subdivision, you're usually seeing street trees, seeing a couple lawn trees, and you're seeing a couple shrubs, like what you'd see around a house. In a commercial space, like Bourbon Square is a really good example of how well that's landscaped. You get a lot more plants in a very small spot. It's much more highly maintained and much more highly planted. So we thought that we were getting the appropriate landscaping for this spot where it was needed.
So how many trees were supposed to be there? You say that there's some replaced by the greening, and then 13,000 for replacing 30 trees. So how many total trees are supposed to be on this site according to the Natural Features Code?
Don't have that for landscape architect. That's a great question for Vanessa. You know, these.
So could you start, please, by just introducing
Of course.
yourself?
My name is Vanessa Meyer. I'm the landscape architect on the project. And so to your question, we are deficient 76 deciduous trees and 32 evergreen trees. And just an understanding, there's currently 11 trees on the site right now. And we're proposing 115 shade trees, 40 evergreen trees, almost 600 shrubs, and over 3,000 grasses, perennials, ground covers. So Chris was mentioning, you know, the deficiency and, you know, what that conversion chart is. So we've taken those 108 deficient trees, times it by 30 conversion, and that's where we've gotten those perennials to really maximize the robust.
Thank you for walking me through that. I do appreciate it. In terms of stormwater management and carbon sequestration, would you say your plan is better than if we required you to actually just put in the trees?
I don't know, because trees, you know, take up a lot of water, but at the same time, we have, currently it's about 100% impervious. We're reducing that. So, you know, wherever we have the pervious area, it's almost naturally infiltrating. The stormwater we do have, which Aaron can mention it, sort of an underground area along the west.
I completely understand that the stormwater management will be massively improved. That's big. The other part of my question was around carbon sequestration. Do you believe that your greening, the plantings that you're putting in, will have better impact on mitigating carbon emissions than the trees? Okay, thank you.
Courtney, one thing that you're not seeing that I didn't have in my presentation, I was only focused on the public area of landscaping. There are also a number of roofs that are private that are also heavily landscaped in here that are almost functioning as green roofs without, they're not getting any credit for it, but it has a significant amount of landscape in those areas.
Great. This question, I know I should have emailed to you earlier, so I apologize, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When I checked back in April, the township still had $90,000 escrowed for planting trees from developments that had given us money instead of trees. Is that still the case? Has that number gone down or up?
It's only gone down, but a little bit. One of the problems with that is that we've been trying to work with both the Shade Tree Commission to identify locations for that. I think what you've seen, there's been a number of new members of the Shade Commission. I believe the Shade Tree Commission is becoming a little bit more activist in doing this. About a generation ago, when staff started encouraging that fund to be developed, we had a little bit more I think the Shade Tree Commission was a little bit younger and people like going out and planting trees and doing that work above and beyond what the township arborists could do. I think you're seeing that next generation of volunteers coming into the township, working with civic associations. I would expect now that seeing people that really want to move with that number will go down.
Okay. I mean, that would be great, because right now, based on the numbers I had in April, it took us 7 years to spend $30,000. So that's another 20 years to spend what we had. And now we're adding in 13 grand. I hope we can increase that rate. Yeah. One more question on the sustainability condition. You sort of alluded to this, and this might be something better directed to the applicant, but we have our traditional weak language around shall consider incorporating green technology. In your discussions with the applicant, or maybe the applicants could speak to this, are there any aspects of this that we can make a will do as opposed to a shall consider?
That's a great question for the applicant. They knew to be aware of that question. Early on in the process, we had presented to them that sustainability was a large part of this project. I've seen lists from the applicant of how they were meeting that. They'll be more prepared to answer the question.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner Sinai, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. So Chris, I want to follow up on Commissioner Courtney's questions about the Natural Features Code. So just so I make sure I understand this clearly, the reason that we're considering a waiver for those 33s is that, in essence, Natural Features Code conflicts with what is allowed in the old version of MUS, the old zoning code. And if this were in a typical other kind of rest of the township area, we would not be talking trees,
Correct.
just this location.
Correct. This was discussed in the comprehensive plan. We recognize this mismatch between the township's landscape requirements and the township zoning, and that we needed to have appropriate scale downtown landscaping, which is what we've done in the new zoning.
And so, when you do the calculation of how much plant material needs to be substituted for a tree, is it, you take kind of the area that would have been covered by a tree and you replace it with area that's planted? Is that one way to think about it?
No, we've done it because a number of developers aren't interested in coming planting off-site physically, and there's a lot of liability concerns and operational issues. So what we've done is we've taken the value of the plant, and we started everything as the key value is a deciduous tree is 1, and then
so they have to replace the dollars of planting other
correct
equivalent dollars.
1 deciduous tree equals 1.5 evergreen trees. That equals 12 shrubs.
So I guess, a concern I have is that it doesn't matter how many expensive grasses you plant, like they don't generate shade the way a tree does. And I think one of the things we see in our downtown areas is that shade is important. So how should I think about like the shade aspect here?
You should look at it from the performance of the landscape. So
Okay.
when we review the landscape plan, and I had earlier, you see that there are trees. If we look at the streetscape, it's continually treed. Where one would walk is continually treed. Now, just as a detail, the applicant has proposed a columnar tree along Lancaster Avenue. That's something the staff and the Shade Tree Commission aren't going to reject. We're going to suggest and require them to plant something that has a broader canopy to it to make sure that we get that shade. But the pattern of trees of 30 feet apart on the entire perimeter is what will generate that shade.
And so one thing I saw, I guess, in the MCPC comments that I guess alarmed me that so the pit trees look terrific. I appreciate the condition that says there's structural soils in there. Right? I think that's terrific. But the MCPC alluded to some trees are going to be in containers. And are those trees going to be assumed to provide shade? Right, because we have on Lancaster, we have some trees are just like doing nothing, even though they were planted in the plan like right?
Correct.
Make sure it doesn't happen.
Vanessa can come back up again. But it's our understanding that the shade trees themselves, the ones that the township, when new development is required and put in, the area along the curb is required to have shade. That's what we refer to as shade. Those are all areas that are not in containers. Those are actually in the ground, and that's where the structural soil relates. There are other elements in their public plazas, on the roofs, that where you don't have the room to put to plant a tree in the ground, that those would be.
Okay, so that's fine. I don't need to hear from the landscape architect. If the trees along the street, actually in the sidewalk, the pedestrian ways are actually going to be
those are not in plan.
Larger shade. So I will make the following pitch while we're here, which is that one of the things that happens when you take the 30 trees and get the cash value for them is that sometimes you have those trees not planted in the places that need trees. Places that need trees are paved, right? And the trees end up someplace in that township that already has a lot of trees. And maybe going forward we can consider things that have some radius, or have some put something towards a full green roof, or some other way of creating environmental benefit for those. So next question, I wanted to follow up on the median, and I was thrilled to see that there was a median here. I think Commissioner McComb alluded to the median and to the avenue. I think a true grassy median is actually a benefit, a great benefit, even beyond the fact that you don't get left turns, because it has a tremendously positive effect on greening. And so my question is, I think, different from the other commissioners, which is how mountable do they have to be? So for example, the City Avenue medians are mostly mountable, but they actually have signs at the ends. Like you couldn't actually literally drive down the center median if you were an ambulance. You could cross over at that spot. And so the question is there any ability to put more than just grass, like more landscaping at parts of it, or even, God forbid, like trees there to help break up that street? Because these things do a great job at reducing the speed of the road. I
can't answer that right yet. We need to design it. And
okay.
There's a number of parties that need to be part of this. First is PennDOT. Of course, they're their road. We also need to bring in public works. We need to bring in the fire department. Fire department is really the ones, emergency services, going to say how mountable it needs to be, where it's going to go. But with that, I mean, there's always a tendency to over-design it to be, you know, why our roads are so wide for fire trucks. But we don't want to. We want to find that right balance. And then, honestly, we need to find a way to appropriately maintain these sort of. We're moving into an area of increased expectations in our community of our public realm. We don't have the operational capacity right now. We're moving in that direction. We need to develop. And that's something that, as we move forward in the Ardmore Master Plan, I think will get us there. Because that's a component. We can design a lot of these things, but if we can't maintain them, it's not worth the effort.
Well, I certainly hope the kind of pilot thinking that you're doing in this project can get applied more broadly to the Ardmore Master Plan and other master plans that you're doing. But I think any opportunity that we have to create a little untrafficked spot and a little more green is probably a good thing to do. The last couple of questions. So in your briefing, I think I saw that you mentioned that the Greenfield sidewalk is getting a little narrower. Did I read that correctly from the previous plan? You mentioned.
Nothing.
Or did I misread it? I might have misread the sidewalk on the Greenfield side.
We have a condition that it should be wide. Look at trying to widen that where we can.
Okay, thank you. Because there's a parking lot at the far end of that currently. That won't always be a parking lot, presumably.
Right.
And we wouldn't want it to be disconnected. Okay. So, and then I think last thing, the walkway, which has a condition that basically says staff is going to work with the applicant. And in the issue briefing, you mentioned a whole bunch of things that would be helpful with that walkway, including widening it, lights, having some glazing. So all these things that made sense. And then you said you're going to take up light, et cetera, everything but widening. And is widening off the table, or is widening one of the things that's going to be, considered there?
Well, what the applicant presented Monday night at the planning commission, a lot of our write-up was prior to the planning commission. The applicant was able to present to the planning commission a 9-foot wide walkway. It was wide. It was, am I correct? 9, not 7? 7, I'm sorry. It's 7 feet wide. But it showed comfortably 2 people able to walk side by side through this area. I think that was part of our comfort. It's in an area with a higher ceiling going through. And the renderings that the applicant showed were a very, a decorative wall, very decorative lighting through it. It wasn't what was originally envisioned as, some kind of dark place that people didn't want to go. But the renderings that were shown were integrated into the building itself. It was really just an extension of the building. And one of the things that I thought was important that the applicant was able to point out is from either end, you'll be able to see daylight. So you won't be going into an endless tunnel. You'll be going somewhere where you're going.
Okay, great.
So we were comfortable with the direction that they were moving.
I appreciate the explanation. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other commissioner questions for staff? And I see none online. So now we're going to move to just optional. I don't know if the applicant wants to make a brief statement on their saying yes. So we ask you, since I think Chris gave us a really pretty good description of the project, you can make some comments, but try not to duplicate what he said.
Sure. George Broseman, representing the applicant. We have a lot of folks here. Good to see everybody in person again. That was a very extensive presentation. I know a lot of you came to our community meetings, so I think we'll keep it brief. I don't know if I really have to go into anything. Commissioner Courtney did have a question for us, and I know there Brian from Toll wanted to address you. You may recall that Toll Apartment Living is the development partner, so maybe I would ask him to do that.
Yeah.
I'll try to answer the question.
If I may, just while you're getting set up. So what I'd like to do, if you'd like to make a quick statement, and then I'm going to open it up for commissioners to ask.
I just put up on the screen here, many of you attended these, but I tried to keep track of the meetings that we had with the outreach. And again, thanks to Commissioner Stevenson and others in the community. I see Micah Sneed from the Ardmore Progressive, some clergy members. This is a list that I kept of the meetings we went to. I may have even missed some. So it was impressive. And I know many of the commissioners, besides Commissioner Stevenson, met with us during tentative sketch. So I think that was very helpful. Is there anything else you wanted to just Okay, Brian.
Hi, Brian Oos. I'm a Director of Acquisitions and Development for the Mid-Atlantic region of Toll Brothers Apartment Living. I wanted to give you a brief introductory statement. I haven't committed memory, so reading. But first, I'd just like to say thank you to the members of the public for participating in the process and the Commission for taking the time to hear our application. Toll Brothers Apartment Living has deep ties in the Lower Merion community, and many of our team members here today at all levels of our organization live in the township. Committed to every project we do and are excited about the opportunity to create a vibrant community that is that fits into the fabric of Ardmore. This is an extremely important and prominent project for us that will become the centerpiece of our regional portfolio. We've been working with the Piazza family and the township on this project for over 2 years. We're excited to present the results of those efforts to you here today. We've done extensive outreach with the community for the past 2 years to ensure we've listened and addressed community needs and concerns. We've incorporated community and resident feedback and have focused on public design of our project to ensure we're adding to the walkable nature and vibrancy of downtown Ardmore. Additionally, we are working with a grocer as an anchor tenant that will provide another walkable option. With our strong ties to the community, we look forward to being a partner and active member of the downtown Ardmore community. Again, we thank you for your time today. We look forward to hearing your feedback and any questions.
Thank you.
We have more slides, but I think I'm making the decision that you don't need them unless you ask.
Yeah, thank you very much. So what I'd like to do.
Commissioner Grimes, could I interrupt for a second? I would like to see the slide of the architect.
Yeah, just thank you.
The renderings.
If I may, George, the planning commission, and I was there on the other night, you put up, some of that shows the 70% of where you are, gives people an appreciation of what this is going to look like from your perspective at this point in time.
Sure. Happy to do that.
There were just a couple of them. I think it would be educational. Thank you.
Happy to do that. Let me page through these. Sure. So hi, good evening. Again, let me reiterate what George said. It's really a pleasure to be back in person. My name is Seth Shapiro. I am a principal and director of planning and urban design for Barton Partners Architects. We are the land planners, urban designers, and architects for this project, as well as Cricket Flats, who thank you for that. So I'm going to take you actually around the building in terms of the perspective renderings. So this is actually a view looking towards the west on Lancaster Avenue and south on Ardmore Avenue. So this is the corner that's across from the bank. And of course, the McDonald's would actually be on our right. And you can see the building. And just to be clear, it's one of the conditions that we were talking about today had to actually do with these inset panels right here. While we have masonry materials here and here, our thought was that it would be nice to actually have this as an inset metal panel. And so whether that turns into more masonry or if we thicken up some of the masonry is part of what we're going to continue to work with staff on. But we actually like the variety of the masonry on the outside and the metal panel on the inside. And that's why we were uncomfortable with shall replace versus shall or investigate and reduce. So this is a sort of if you were hovering over Lancaster Avenue, looking at that center, sort of what we call a shared space or a Warner space, which everybody's familiar with because they exist over at Suburban Square. But it's a sort of a vehicular access area to the project, but also a pedestrian access area to the project. That's why we call it a shared space. It's actually about 90 feet wide now. We did increase that width from tentative sketch now to really make it more of a gathering space. And it's a flexible space so that, in fact, at times we can actually close that space off to vehicles exiting the project. And you can see actually in this rendering, we actually parked a food truck in there, and you can see it's more of a plaza space. So that's at the ground level. Moving again further to the west, now we're at the corner of Greenfield and Lancaster. Greenfield on the right, and you can see that Greenfield is actually sloping down, the source of that conditional use we discussed. And here again, we have 3 levels of brick, and then we have some inset panels. And again, that was the other place where we talked about reducing, but not fully replacing, because we actually like that inset. What we've been trying to avoid is the idea of sort of painted on, is what we heard at the Planning Commission. And we like to sort of change those dimensions, I think, as successfully as like we did at Cricket Flat. So that's why we have that material change there, as opposed to making it a little bit more flat. And then around, this is now looking up towards Lancaster from Greenfield and the new Athens Avenue extension. The Fox Park parking lot would be to the right. And one of the conditions is investigating a crosswalk actually over here, which we're working on. It's a little bit hard because we're not quite sure where it's going to land on the Fox Park property yet. We have to actually work with them on that. But also part of the conditions, we had removed some ventilation grate here and also around the back of the building, at least the back that is facing onto at the West Athens Avenue extension. We have found different ways of ventilating the building. This is a shot that was actually specifically requested by the folks at St. Mary's to say, hey, what would this look like from actually their property? We had actually done a before and after with them, and it was really convincing because, you know, right now they're looking back, essentially an auto body shop, and lots of utility wires. It's kind of a mess. And I think this rendering did a lot of justice to that. So you can see here, these red doors right here. This is actually those loading docks that I think Chris had mentioned before that, you know, they would have closed. And this is actually one of the access points to the parking area over here. Now we're actually at ground level on Ardmore Avenue. If this were truly accurate, you might actually be able to see a bit of the McDonald's just at the corner here. But this is another area where we pulled the building back to create a little bit more gathering area, not just to have some outdoor seating area, but also having like a low wall and an area for people to be seating. And also you can see that landscaped area between the sidewalk and the Ardmore Avenue curb. This is sort of a zoom in of that. Lastly, this is the walkway that Chris had mentioned and George talked about before. The interesting thing about this is this walkway was requested at the tentative sketch phase. And I turned to Chris when he asked for it. I said, are you crazy? We can't do this. It's impossible. But it was possible. There's a grade change between Lancaster Avenue and the West Athens Avenue extension. So we actually have a series of ramps in here, but we figured out a way. Let's do it this way. You would come in from that shared space, that plaza space in front, and then you can walk down this way. You would actually, this is a ramping here, another ramp here, and then out to West Athens Avenue extension. So this is a view looking from the West Athens Avenue extension towards Lancaster, and actually you can see the sort of the ramp down into the parking here, but you can actually see through it. Next one. The next one is now we're at that shared space, that plaza space looking towards West Athens, and you can see it's wide open. It's not a tunnel, right? It's sort of a protected pedestrian place area within the garage area. And then finally, this is just a view as if you were standing or you were in a car in that garage area, looking at that sort of pedestrian walkway. The wall is treated. We'll have some pieces of art or other signage in there. So that's what it looks like.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to take some, if you don't mind, some questions for the applicant. Why don't you, Mr. Commissioner Stevenson, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question, Attorney Brosman, is looking at the market value of this, would you, it is going to be comparable to like a Cricket Flat type of clientele we're looking for in price?
Yes.
You heard me ask Last Wing questions about staging. Again, I want to reemphasize with you and ask you about that because you have, while I hold the township responsible for the enforcement piece, for you in good partnership, one of the things the neighbors have come out about is their concern about parking or people encroaching on that. And do you or your team have that in place, or do you have something you can speak to ensure that you're going to do your due diligence around that to work with the township and the neighbors to avoid that of mistrust?
Yeah, we hope there's not mistrust. We work hard to build rapport with the community, but with regard to construction parking, we do have those conditions of approval. We would be happy to provide the contact person. I would say that Cole does a lot of construction projects, I'm sure in very dense urban areas, and they're probably gotten very good at managing these type of issues. So I know they're committed to that. We have those conditions. Another benefit that this property offers, we believe, is that, you know, there will be a substantial excavation being made, but there will come a point in time in the construction, it is believed, when the West Athens extension will be complete, although not yet open to the public. And those parking spaces will become available on site. So we believe, you know, at that point, parking can transition right into those areas. So that will take the pressure off even as the project goes on. So we feel confident that we'll work with the township on that. We don't want to cause a problem with the community or the neighborhood.
Thank you. Next question, I guess for Seth. The public space, can you talk about how that public space is and relationship to, when you say public, is it something open to the public, residents, or what?
So the public space, any public space that's on the ground floor at grade is open to the public. I mean, it's privately owned area and it's privately maintained, but it's open to the public. I mean, it's not fenced off or anything like that. The building itself has amenity spaces for residents. That's actually grade separated in courtyards up on the second floor, as well as amenity space that feeds that. That is private to the residents. But at ground level, it's public.
Thank you. The business piece. Next part is about the business leasing piece of the business. One of the things that, you know, going back to the neighbors have come out about. I mean, IHOP has come over 1,000 times, but my question is that the and this, I guess, is Toll Brothers can answer this. Is the answer is that without asking you to commit to any business, which I know you can't, that you're those that need forth if they come forth be a part.
Yes, I think that's a fair statement. And generally speaking, it is early in the process for us to lease spaces to smaller tenants. Know what that be. But we want to listen to the community and curate a mix of retail, and the sensitivity to IHOP in particular, and we are.
Great. And before you leave, this is just a statement. In condition 46, thank you for saying that you're interested in having members of the community be employment or otherwise. I would ask in a non-conditional form that you also consider including minority and women contractors or subcontractors in those conversations. My next question is about sustainability, and again, this is not an ask for on condition 64. Ask that it's included. However, I would ask that the applicant do take advantage of the fact that our township does have a sustainability. I don't know the title, so I'll just say a sustainability guru, and I would hope that you will also work with that person around because about the options about sustainability as well. My traffic study questions were already answered, and actually, I think that's it. So thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
for your
Thank
feedback.
you. Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Yeah, I just want to repeat my question with regard to what's on my paperwork, condition 65, around the shall consider incorporating green technology. Are there any commitment that you'd be willing to make this evening?
I can take a stab at it. Maybe Seth will help me out. I always have to say, we believe the project is inherently sustainable by being built where it is and what it is. But we do know that there will be green features. I'm looking at the notes here. There will be electric vehicle charging stations. And I'll let Seth address the other issues so I don't get myself going out of my area of expertise.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to just build on something that George said is that, right now this site is 100% impervious with 11 trees, right? 11 trees on it. And that's obviously being increased by, I think someone calculated over 1,000. So there's that. There's also the car charging stations that George just mentioned. And in fact, we're actually adding infrastructure for additional charging stations because we think that's actually something that's going to continue to grow. In terms of other sustainability features, I would also point out that, 5-10 years ago, we talked about things like LEED. Well, now if you build to the current building code, you were basically LEED where LEED was 5 or 10 years ago, become that much more strict. So you're actually seeing is a big reduction in buildings that are pursuing LEED because LEED has become somewhat unattainable. You almost have to generate your own power. So there's that. I don't know, Bill, did you want to add anything? This is, by the way, Bill Warwick is one of my partners, and he's actually the architectural principal in charge as the project moves forward.
As far as other elements inside of the building, sorry. For once. As far as elements inside the building, we would anticipate full LED lighting everywhere, interior and exterior. We're expecting low flow fixtures, typically Energy Star appliances in all the units, high efficiency furnaces and those sorts. So, and as Seth mentioned, with building code standards today, the insulation that's required, U values and the R values on the windows are required, very tight envelope system for the building. So they tend to be very energy efficient buildings.
Okay. Kind of curious what you said about the LEED standard there. I think it's great that our building codes have improved, and I think it's great that you'll abide by them. I know we have a representative of Toll Brothers here. I've got your website up here because you're a public company. You have to make an ESG statement. You say you believe that sustainability and preservation of the natural environment are important to building exceptional homes and community. We have an exceptional community. In 2020, it says you did 47 units of LEED. If you did this whole building in LEED, would you 4x, 5x? I'm bad at math right now. 5x your number of units. How about it?
I don't know that we can, as has been stated earlier, we are still early in the design process. LEED is something we have achieved other projects where I'm not sure that it's doing today to what goal or increase would be here, but we feel like we've got a very collaborative. Other suggestions?
I do appreciate the efforts you're going to, and I appreciate you having better answers this time than a tentative sketch, but I have to say I'm still a little bit disappointed at the lack of commitment. And while you seem to be towing the line on your website, I think you can do better. 47 units in 1 year for a large corporation like Toll Brothers doesn't seem like that much.
Is that it? Okay. Other Commissioner Kramer, please.
I'm just wondering what design features you're building in to make the facility safe for residents in light of the pandemic?
I'm actually embarrassed to say that I think that's the first time I've been asked that question, even during the entire pandemic. I'm not sure that there are specific architectural issues associated with that just yet. There may be some ventilation advances in technology that have to do with that. I mean, each unit is.
Each unit has its own ventilation.
Right, so it's not.
Excuse me, hold on, excuse me, one at a time at the mic, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so each unit has its own ventilation system. So it's not like there's, we're sharing air in between units. But that's been standard par for the course for building technology for a while. I will tell you that what we have been seeing overall, and this is just anecdotal, not necessarily specific to this project, is that our units have been getting slightly larger and have been including workstation areas. Sometimes they have dens where people, so that people can work from home, because we think actually that the whole 5-day work week, although not as of present for us, but the whole 5-day work week or going into the office is maybe not continuing in the future. So that is something that is a pandemic. The other thing I would say is that because of our focus on the public realm, the idea that sidewalks here that surround this building are, in at least our opinion, one of the most important things about it. We've seen alfresco dining, just the revolution in alfresco dining. And actually that really started before the pandemic, became so important during the pandemic, keep places alive. I live right around the corner from what used to be Cafe Lift, that is now, but they still have their tent up in the parking lot, right? I don't know that they're ever going to take it down. So the idea that we have those spaces are in place to have that sort of expansive retail experience at the ground floor, which is also a very sort of urban friendly thing, is something else we're doing. But I'd like to get back to you on maybe doing a little bit of research on what other technologies are out there in terms of sort of making multifamily buildings a little bit more pandemic safe. Hopefully we're done with this for a whole another century when we have another one.
Well, there are always viruses of different kinds, and I would like you to commit that you'll take a good hard look at the state of the art in terms of health safety in the buildings.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Are there any commissioners online who wish to ask any questions? Commissioner Churchill, please make sure to unmute yourself, please.
Real quick, on the trees that you're going to provide, are you going to provide them or provide them and install them?
Commissioner Churchill, we're making a contribution to the township in the township accepted amount for a tree.
Okay. Also, stormwater management, I assume that this project meets or does it exceed stormwater 25-year requirement?
I know it meets the requirement. The township engineer tells me it exceeds the requirement.
Ooh, that's what I'd like to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Anyone else online? Okay. Any other commissioner questions for the developer? Okay. So what we're going to do now, I am going to make a motion, and if there's a second, we will then take public comment, and then we'll come back for commissioner comments. So as I said earlier, there's 2 motions tonight. I'm going to do the first one, and we'll do public comment and vote on the first one, then we'll do the second. I move to consider for recommendation of the Board of Commissioners approval of a conditional use plan for 104, 108, 114, 120, 124, 130, 150, and 198 West Lancaster Avenue in Ardmore. This would be a conditional use approval pursuant to zoning code section 155-87.25-C-3, .3, to deviate from the following development design standards: A, to provide a window sill height more than 2 feet above the elevation of the adjacent sidewalk along Greenfield Avenue and West Athens Avenue extension. B, to provide window head heights of more than 12 feet above the elevation of the adjacent sidewalk along Greenfield Avenue and the West Athens Avenue extension. And C, to provide less than 50% clear windows along the ground floor along the West Athens Avenue extension. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner McComb. It's seconded. Okay. You want to say something, Chris?
I did. I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Stevenson and Commissioner Zeloff with a couple additional conditions to clarify points that they had raised. I don't know if you wanted me to read those in now or.
Are they for the conditional use plan or are they for the
they're
later?
not for the conditional use.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't you hold those then, if you don't mind? All right. So now we are going to take public comment. If there's anyone who wishes to offer public comment who's here in person, I don't see anyone online. We ask you to go over to that side. And although some of you have offered public comment many, many times, you haven't done it in about 16 months. So just as a reminder, in person, I mean, please state your name and your neighborhood, and then we ask you to take about 3 minutes maximum to make whatever comments you'd like to make.
Commissioner Grimes, just as a point of order, are you seeking public comment right now only for conditional use or for public comment for the entire enchilada?
This is public comment. I guess technically we have to ask for public comment again on the preliminary plan approval. But having said that, you're welcome to make them once and not come back. In fact, we'd probably prefer that.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm not sure which
that's okay. Just
which they're on. Okay.
Go for it.
Hello. It's good to see everyone again in person. Adrian Seltzer, South Ardmore Park, Barry. As I read through this War and Peace, I noticed a standard condition of approval number 67. The applicant shall submit the required recreation fee of $3,000 per unit prior to the issuance of the building permit. I did some quick calculations and that comes out to like $840,000. And I'm hoping that the commissioners will consider looking at some of the 172 properties that the township owns and building a baseball field there so that they don't have to tear down 500 old growth trees in Villanova. Okay. Second. All right. Here it is. Under number 7, which is probably in the second thing of affordability, I was really concerned that the zoning code does not require the applicant to incorporate affordable units into the development. However, the condition of the tentative sketch plan required that the applicant address that. So my thing is, why is that not in the zoning code? What happened to the 5% if there were no affordable units in the whole building? Also, I remember from a separate meeting or whatever, some talk about an incubator in the one corner of small businesses that were neighborhood businesses. So it could be a starting point to help grow entrepreneurship in the township. So those are my, so I was wondering what happened to that. Why isn't affordability in the zoning code? I hope I'm still under 3 minutes. And what are you going to spend that $840,000? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for public comment? Sir, just step right up.
Hi, my name is John Keeler. I live at 202 Cricket Avenue here in Ardmore. And, you know, my neighborhood, I live right almost one house in from Cricket and Spring, is where the townhouses were built there. Top of Cricket Avenue, we had one Ardmore Place. Across the street, there was another building up there. And so you would think I'd be up here to say, like, I'm done with development and things like that. I'm not, actually. I'm here in favor of this project because that stretch of road there along Lancaster Ave, when you're walking, I go up Parlor all the time. I'm always walking in Ardmore with kids, and you get to the end of Lancaster, or you get to Ardmore Ave in Lancaster right there, and and there's just nothing beyond there except parking lot and Volkswagens parked on the sidewalk and like an urban desert until you get to Greenfield Avenue and some stuff. And so I'm also a teacher in the district, so I am also thinking about enrollment in the district always. So there is the thought of this is a lot of apartments. Fine, I understand that. But I really think that the development of this property in the fashion that I've seen in the plans, I've been following, everything that's been sent out. Commissioner Stevenson sends us emails and get all documents and everything, and that's really great and helpful. And I just like what I'm seeing, and I hope that Lancaster corridor can be extended in this way. You have Mapes down past Greenfield and the businesses down there that can be tied into that flow of like the Ardmore Lancaster Avenue corridor. And so I just really think this is a good idea. Like what I've seen, like what I've heard. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Okay, and I see no one online. Let me just report, we did receive some written public comment. And just to summarize, we heard from Nancy Scarlato from the Ardmore Initiative in support of the project, and from Micah Sneed in Ardmore suggesting with some suggestions and concerns related to this project and other development projects. And finally, from Michael Pollack, who mentioned concerns about pedestrian access, particularly from Woodside and under the bridge that Chris had been talking about earlier. And I believe, Jody, that if anyone wants to inspect these comments, they can contact the Township Secretary's office. Okay, thank you. So I will close public comment, and now we will take any comments from commissioners who wish to weigh in on this. So, anybody? President Bernheim, please.
Surprised that there are no other comments. I will be brief and blunt, and want to make sure that on the front end it's understood that what I'm about to say, it doesn't intend to malign or be derogatory to any of the individuals involved, applicant and all the professionals. They have, many of them appear here for us many times, and they have first-rate reputations for good cause. But I am troubled by this project. I'm not candid if I didn't acknowledge 279 units at that corner of Ardmore is not, quote, like the rest of Ardmore. It does not, in my humble opinion, fit into the fabric of Ardmore. It is massive. And what is going to occur is that there is going to be significant traffic changes. This will be a game changer. It is more reminiscent of what I see on South Broad Street in Philadelphia, not what I see in Ardmore. That being stated, I recognize, unfortunately, and notwithstanding a lot of research to try to find another avenue to vote differently, but that this meets the requirements of our code. And unfortunately, on many occasions, we have to say to ourselves that we need to uphold whatever the laws and ordinance are that are for us, and not vote as what may be our personal preference. Even if this was 179 units, I would buck. While there is something needed, as the gentleman just indicated, in that section of town, this really is a game changer. And I hope that all the issues that have been referenced here, those that were referenced before the Planning Commission, that the applicant will and the staff will continue to work with the township, and that I hope that my visions of this being a traffic nightmare are dead wrong, and that we will have to make sure that we can make this walkable as possible, that we can make it as convenient for the people who get around. But I really wish there was a way that I could twist arms to dial this thing back significantly, help Ardmore, and not overcrowd Ardmore.
Thank you. Commissioner McKeon, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I agree 100% with what President Bernheim said. Just the background on this project, it was submitted back in July of 2019 and Must allowed for so much development. We actually changed the height limit on Must as a board in November 2019. We reduced the height in Ardmore from 78 feet to 39 feet. That was months before we actually changed the whole zoning code, but that's because of how important it was to dial back the impacts of Must. And we're paying for that with this project. I was just looking at the conditional use hearing, the memorandum there, June 14th, 2021. The proposed findings of fact in that memo, the word must is mentioned at least 32 times. So this whole project, it came in under must, and I think it looks like overkill. I look at that diagram on page 14 that we saw, and to me, that's like a mini city that's coming in. I think there's a lot of good stuff with it, though. The greening, the new buildings. The resident who just spoke about the neighborhood stopping. I think that's a good point to go and continue it. My concern is though that this is so large that it really transforms the neighborhood as opposed to merely carrying it on. So I think it's a difficult project because it's so dense, but it's also compliant under the now obsolete Must code. So it puts us in a difficult position because we voted to get rid of Must nearly 2 years ago.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. Anyone else? Okay. I'm just looking online. I see no one else. So let me just add one final point. I mean, I certainly agree with President Bernheim and Commissioner McKeon. This project is compliant, and I will just add code compliant. And I will just add another thought that while certainly I respect there's obviously been a lot of effort to, if you got to have 279 units within the code, this is probably the best we're going to do to have that kind of density here. There's been a lot of thought, a lot of care into putting in, the plantings and other things, and we've heard that tonight. But I would just express one other regret, and that's that we have not heard that there will be any affordable housing component of this project. As most of us know, or I think acknowledge, we have lost residents to development all throughout the township, but particularly in the area where this project will be, not necessarily on this footprint, but in the area around this project. And it's regrettable that we don't have a way, at least yet, to allow residents who are displaced to have an affordable way of staying in the community. So that is certainly not meant against this project in particular. I'm more noting an issue that we discussed last week and that we ought to solve, because this project didn't cause it, and this project is within the code, but this project is also not helping us resolve the affordable housing problems that we have. So having said that, please, Commissioner Zoll.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I want to just, I want to add to what's been said, but add something different. This is transit-oriented development. And so Must started out with development near transit. And we have a train line that was significantly used and now is not because of the pandemic. We talked about that last week and how to help bring back usage of the train line. That is something that I think will significantly benefit this community. But development near transit is a sort of a foundation that we have been working with in Lower Merion for some time. And this is an enormous project. But if there's going to be a place for it, it should be near a train station. And this wouldn't, arguably near two train stations. And so will there be fewer vehicles as a result? We all hope so. Love to see some staff analysis on that post-development. I think that's going to be, on this and other development that's near transit, is going to be important for us to have a better understanding of, is TOD really working in Lower Merion? We all.
Okay, seeing that, I will
Oh, I'm sorry. Just on the condition.
I'm sorry.
The next one,
Yes,
we
we'll
can
get to
introduce
that.
amendment.
Yes, we'll get to
Thank
that
you.
in a moment. Okay, this is on the conditional use amendment. All those in favor, please say aye, or if you're online, raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously. Thank you. So we'll now move on to the preliminary land development plan application. Now, I'm prepared to make a motion. What I would suggest, Chris, I think you said that you've already presented us with two amendments, the number 4 and number 18. I would just throw it, assuming you were going to propose one about pedestrian access. I took the liberty of drafting something that was okay with Commissioner Zeloff, if you don't mind me saying that publicly. So I will read that, and if it's okay to see what gets your reaction.
It's certainly the chair's prerogative.
Well, okay. So this would either be added on to condition 57 or a new condition 57A that would say applicant will work with township staff on developing and implementing safe pedestrian routes through the project site during construction. Okay.
Almost exactly what we wrote, what we drafted.
Great minds think alike. Would you like to make that a 57A, or how would you like to do it? Add it to 57?
I think we just added to the end of 57.
Fine. Okay, good. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to propose?
Just to address Commissioner Stevenson's concern about reporting during construction, and we wanted to add a sentence at the end of condition 55 that the applicant shall identify a contact person to be on site and to enforce the parking plan.
Was on to 55.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Does the applicant have any comments on either of these?
I just had a question. I didn't consult with my client, but on the first condition where you said through the site, they certainly don't want to have people walking through the site. I assume you mean around the site.
Right, we could, yes, I'll say around the project site or on the perimeter of the
Through and
project
around.
site. Yeah, yeah, on the perimeter. Does that work for you? That's okay. So you want me to read it again for you? This is 57 would now be continued to say applicant will work with township staff on developing and implementing safe pedestrian routes on the perimeter of the project site during construction. Okay, we're all right there. All right. So if we're okay on those, and so were there any other commissioners who wanted to add any other conditions that we haven't discussed? Commissioner Kramer.
I'd like to add that the applicant will research and implement state-of-the-art health considerations in the design and construction of the building.
Can you repeat that?
Could you say it a little
you.
louder? Sorry.
The applicant will research and implement state-of-the-art health considerations in the design and construction of the building. Somebody's got better language, I'll take their language.
Roseman, you have a reaction to that one?
I didn't have a chance to speak to my client, but my concern would be, I think we could look into it, but I don't think we could commit to implementing state-of-the-art health considerations. I would be concerned what that entails.
Well,
I'd love to see a commitment to actually doing it if once you explore it.
Maybe what I should do, because I'm maybe getting lit up, maybe I should put before taking all the amendments, because this may require a little more discussion, maybe I should put the resolution, the motion on the table, and then we can discuss and see if they're friendly amendments or not. And I apologize, I should have done that sooner. So let me move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a preliminary land development plan for 104, 108, 114, 120, 124, 130, 150, and 198 West Lancaster Avenue in Ardmore. The plan dated March 1, 2021, last revised June 25, prepared by Bowler Engineering, shows demolition of all existing structures on site. consolidation of 8 properties into one 3.5 acre property and construction of 5-story mixed-use building. I'm not going to read the rest of this as set forth in our agenda, and with the amendments to the agenda plan, modifications to section 55 and 57 as were discussed a few moments ago. The modification amendment numbers 4 and 18 that were presented by staff. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Sinai. Was that clear, Jody?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we have a motion and we have a second. So now we have Commissioner Kramer's amendment, proposed amendment. Commissioner Kramer, and subject to the, of course, hearing what the applicant thinks, would you be amenable to saying they will consider doing those things?
I would certainly be amenable to that, but I'd like to see something stronger because frankly, given the fact that we've been in the middle of a pandemic for a year and a half, I'm a little bit concerned that they haven't even researched what should be done to make a building as safe as possible. And I would like to see them research it and incorporate what they find in the design. And because that's part of what's necessary to keep our residents healthy and safe.
Well, since it's my motion on the table, I'm not going to consider that friendly amendment, and if you don't mind, I'll explain why. I don't know that this was a subject that was discussed with the applicant, and no one's fault, it just wasn't discussed with the applicant tonight prior to this, and I don't know that I would be comfortable with making them commit to something definitive at this stage when I don't know that they've had a chance to explore the concept. So we can discuss the motion and vote on the motion, but that's why I'd consider using the word consider to be a friendly amendment if they're agreeable, but not anything mandating that they do something at this stage. I don't know if there's any other, if there's a...
I have a question, Chairman. Exactly what was the language, Commissioner Kramer, that you were proposing? Because I'm a little concerned that I think I understand what you're talking about, but the way it was stated, you're talking about the construction of the building. It sounds like you'd be talking about OSHA safety standards or fire safety or fire suppression. It could be a rash of things that I wouldn't blame the applicant for being hesitant to agree to something without understanding what it is they're being. So if you could restate what your proposed amendment is.
Well, that's a fair point. The applicant will, well, how about it with something? The applicant will research and implement state-of-the-art I had health considerations, or we could say health considerations in light of the pandemic in the design and construction of the building.
So
I'll take suggestions for different
Well,
language.
if I may, as a point of order, and I appreciate what Commissioner Kramer's trying to accomplish, and I think she's been one of them, if not the lead proponent on it many times, our focal point on pandemic and things that we can do. But I don't know that two things. One, this is within our jurisdictional purview to impose something, and it may be unintentionally a little bit too amorphous in order to define, as pointed out by the questions just asked by Commissioner McComb. So that I don't know that we can do this, or we're going to be able to find something sitting here right here and now that we'd be permitted to do or permitted to impose. I think that we heard from some reputable people, as I said, and as I indicated, I don't like the project, I like the people, and that, that whatever they're indicated to us that they may research and investigate and come back, that, if there's something that can be done, I get the sense that they're going to look at it and do so.
So, yes, to the extent that if we're going to pursue this further, that you put it in a motion, and we'll see if it's seconded, and then have the discussion officially.
Well, I would, for the purpose of tonight, agree to modify it as you originally requested and said it would be friendly, which is that they will explore it. And then I would like to see if we can have some discussions over the next week about this, see if we can firm it up.
Okay, so if you don't mind, would you mind making a motion so we can hear exactly what words you'd like to be in this? And if you want them a minute, we can come back to you.
How about the applicant will research and consider implementing state-of-the-art design and construction consideration, or well, I had health considerations in the design and construction of the.
Maybe I can offer something.
I'm sorry,
Burnham.
Yeah, what's that?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
please.
I spoke to the applicant and they're willing to do some of this research in the next week and provide a memo to better understand really what we can do.
What are
can
the
be done.
options?
At least understand to frame it. Is it really a matter of ventilation? What does modern health, what does the building codes provide? I think they can provide a little bit of background on that and then see if that's sufficient. But I think they can at least give you some of that information.
Solicitor who's been listening in as to what, if anything, we're capable of.
And we'll look at the building code as well. We'll be able to all, contribute to that.
That works.
Does that work for you?
By next week, we would have some more definitive.
I think that's fine. I don't know what is recommended right now in the construction of buildings in light of the pandemic. I'd like to know, and I'd like it to be incorporated. If there are specific recommendations out there on what would make a building safer for our residents from a health standpoint, I'd like to have it incorporated, but I don't know what those things are right now. So if they will research it, I would be satisfied with that. And then we can address it when this comes up for a final decision.
That's fine. Did you have anything else, Commissioner Kramer?
No, that's it.
Are there any other commissioners who want to make any comments on that? Yeah, Commissioner Zeloff, please.
Commissioner Grimes, I appreciate the amendment regarding a contact at the developer with regard to parking of construction vehicles, but I think that's too limiting. I think there should be a contact at the developer for any and all neighborhood issues, and that's the model that was used previously. What was the example was one Ardmore. I think we did the same thing at Bryn Mawr Hospital. And so I propose that staff change the amendment to make it so that it's not limited to the parking of construction vehicles, which is a very important issue, but there are other important issues that will come up that will impact the neighbors during construction.
I'm going to consider that a friendly amendment. Okay. Anything else, Commissioner Zeloff?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Now, before we take a vote, I'm going to see. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Courtney.
Just wanted to make sure I got the time right. Is this when we should be making comments, or we're gonna?
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
Great.
Well, this was amendments, or just to be clear, since we already asked questions about, I skipped that step here, and we're still going to formally see if there's any other public comment, because we have to. This is the time for other commissioner comments.
In that case, I'll wait until after we see if there's more public.
Why don't we take, if there are any public comment on this one from anyone who didn't speak earlier, I will note, we got your written comment, but go ahead.
Yeah, and thank you for that. That was as an individual, so I just wanted to make a couple additional comments that are on a similar trend. Yeah, Micah Sneed with Ardmore Progressive Civic Association and neighbor of the property on West Athens. I just want to pick up on Commissioner Zeloff's comment that this is our last chance. So I hear your concerns about affordable housing, and in light of the fact that we have nothing on the books to force it in this case, maybe just ask the question of what could we have done for this development? How could we have offered money? I understand we're about to be fabulously rich with federal funding through the American Rescue Plan, that maybe we could have subsidized one unit, anything really within this property. And a comment y'all have heard me make before, I will continue to make it until we get some movement on it, that we hear from the Progressive Civic Association is around allowing people with rent assistance access to the property. That was included in my personal comment. I won't repeat it, but it's a really simple request that we not discriminate against people based on their source of income. And then the recreation fee, you heard to mention earlier, there hasn't been any conversation about use of the recreation fee. That it appears to be coming to us. I understand the staff position that they can't plan for something until they absolutely know that they're going to get it. But all due respect to other citizens, residents of Lower Merion, we would like to see that fee used in Ardmore and specifically in the direct neighborhood that will be mostly impacted by this development. I think that's it. Thank you. Just thanks so much to the staff. A lot of conditions that we can see and read in direct response to the public comment. The amount of public meetings that were held for this development really should be the standard, and we would really like to see continued public meetings as we move forward. I think those could be used to ferret out a lot of the issues. One that just came up, and thank you, Commissioner Zella, for bringing it up. We live behind one Ardmore, and when crews were staging in the mornings, there were a lot of cigarette butts finding their way to the ground, and emails and text messages finding their way to Commissioner Stevenson. So a way to address those issues without having to come down to building and planning or board of commissioners to address those going forward would be great. But also really talking about, and just want to again mention the condition that staff inserted and the applicant allowed around a post-occupancy study of walkability, traffic, and flow around the property. We would love to see that applied to all the different topic areas within the conditions, because we are all really now just talking about the construction and the future and graphic arts of what it might look like. But once it's built, and there's no real opportunity for public redress of a lot of these issues that we didn't foresee, or the ones that we did foresee that we weren't able to. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, so I will close public comment, and now just to be clear, this is the opportunity for commissioners to make any additional comments they would like to make. Commissioner Stevenson, why don't we start with you and then Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say that President Bernheim said a lot of the introduction that I would have made, so I'm going to shorten what I was going to say and start with thanks. I think that most of my colleagues in the public would know that if this was not in my ward, I would have not been voting regardless for this. But I would say that I start off with working with, number one, the applicant, Attorney Brosman, continuously working with them. I would have to thank them for community meetings, conversations about this project. And it would be wrong of me in going through that and working with them. So I wanted to be clarified why I am going to be voting for this, but doing the work on that. I want to also thank staff. Staff has done a yeoman's job of continuously working through this large project. This project is going to change Ardmore. I know someone said that, someone earlier said this it looks like Ardmore. This will not look like Ardmore. This will change Ardmore. It will increase the goals of business. It will increase bringing more people into the area. And I think one of my constituents was leading that it would also increase the number of students. And I almost, that's what you were saying. Yes, thank you. Finally, I have someone who agree with me on that. But what it does not do, it also changes the impact of things that we're talking about that's going to require us to be vigilant about this. It came under must, it's going to stay. We can't change that. But what we have to do is when we're talking about traffic studies, when we're talking about walkability, when we're talking about making sure that we protect the neighborhood in all aspects, that's going to be important. And I would hope that that we can continue to have that partnership under that. There are a couple of things I want to address that why I didn't bring up and talk about it. affordable housing came up on a consistent basis. And I want to clarify why I did not bring this up in this conversation, because the developer is not required to do it, and we can't require them to do it. And so therefore, it is not something I would do, because it's not something that we're requiring other people to do. So therefore, I would ask that if this is, instead of asking developers, that we change our approach on this and make affordable housing a requirement for all future developers. The second piece that I want to talk about is zoning. I'm always, it always makes me smile when people say this is good for Ardmore, this is good for Lower Merion. And that, and I would challenge anyone to say that support me in changing the zoning then, that it does not include exclusionary zoning, that we change exclusionary zoning to make it inclusionary across the township. Therefore, that this development could be put anywhere in the township. If this is a great development, then I would hope that we would support that. The final piece I want to say on a humanistic side, and is that the best part of my 7 o'clock meetings was seeing Seth trying to get his kids ready for school in the middle of a Zoom. Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I want to, Commissioner Stevenson, you said so many things so well. President Bernheim, I agree with a lot of what you said. I do want to say that there are things to appreciate about this project. I agree with what our resident from Ardmore said, that like you get to Ardmore Avenue and you don't want to keep walking. I think it will be great to have a more active and vibrant streetscape there. I think improvements to stormwater management overall will benefit the entirety of the community. But this is a project that's out of character with the current state of Ardmore. This is a project that is massive. And so when I see something like this, I feel like it reveals our own deficiencies in the township. It reveals the deficiencies in our code. It reveals the deficiencies in our planning. We talked about how the current state of the natural features code isn't really applicable here. And we have a project underway to change the natural features code. And I'm sure that work will incorporate these changes, but we have unspent tree money that we're going to increase as part of this. We have a large amount of rec fee coming in without a clear plan about what to do. Ardmore Avenue Community Center certainly comes to mind as a great place to put that. And thank you, Ms. Seltzer, for calling attention to that. We also had Mr. Pollack in public comment talk about the safety of Woodside Avenue and Woodside and Montgomery, that intersection. That intersection of Woodside and Montgomery and the number of accidents that happen there. That is something that we need to address. And one tool that we have that has been on the docket ever since we passed the new zoning code is the Ardmore Master Plan. The Ardmore Master Plan was supposed to start after the new zoning code was passed and the pandemic hit and we had delays. But at present, it doesn't seem like that planning process will get off the ground until next year. So 2 years will go by. And now this project came in under MUST, and Commissioner McKeon already talked about some of the issues we have with MUST and why we changed it. And it's good that we changed it. But and I suppose we should be grateful that this developer didn't take advantage of the height incentive that they could have. But Ms. Seltzer, to answer your question, that's why there isn't an affordable housing requirement, because this developer didn't pursue that incentive for the additional height under MUST. In the Ardmore Master Plan, we have to address all of these issues. We need to spend the time and the care and the public engagement that we had on this one particular project, on that planning process, on all of our legislative and planning processes, because they will have far greater impact, result in far greater change to the township than any one project. And that is a prioritization that I think needs to shift slightly in how we operate. When we do this master planning process, we can address affordability and equitability. We can preserve the historic core and charm and character of Ardmore. We're seeing large buildings go up on the outskirts. We've been able to somewhat protect the interior of Ardmore thanks to historic restrictions. And I think we need to figure out, is that the right thing to do? And this plan and planning process would address that. And lastly, we need to incentivize sustainability. I appreciate the stormwater management improvements, greening that's going to happen here. I will probably forever be disappointed in the lack of voluntary sustainability and environmental actions that developers will take, but I will be more disappointed in the fact that our state legislature won't allow us to require you to do it. And I will continue to harp on this until this plan is underway and until we have a true incentive for sustainable development alongside the one that we have for affordable housing. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. So we've heard from a number of my colleagues here, and I don't think any single one of them has been in favor of scale. And I'm not going to buck that trend. I too am not in favor of the scale of this project. It is allowed under the code that they brought up. I'm not going to repeat the more eloquent things that my colleagues have said. There are good aspects of MUST, right? MUST has some good objectives. I was never a fan of how much scale and density it created a way to achieve those objectives, but the objectives are good. And the question is, well, what is it that this development is bringing as a contribution to the community as opposed to just a benefit for the developer, right? And those contributions for the community are important ones. They are the streetscape improvements that we heard about. There's perimeter parking outside of Ardmore where hopefully people can park there and actually enjoy the parts of the town that aren't just in this. But those are really important because that is what the MUST zoning was actually giving the stencil for, right? You have 500 additional neighbors and actually streetscape improvements that make the downtown more vibrant, more walkable, more activity, more of an asset to the community outside of Ardmore. And we have seen a lot of great things here. And I think there've been a lot of improvements. I think this project over its trajectory, that has continued to improve. And I appreciate the developer for having understood that vision helps both the greater Ardmore community and helps them, and is something that they have embraced. It is incumbent upon us in the township and staff developer that those things that we see in the plans actually materialize the way that we see them, because they are critical to what's going to happen in downtown Ardmore. We need this to be a terrific streetscape in exchange for these 279 units. We need it to be a gathering place. We need it to work. We need it to have high quality materials. We need to have good trees. We need the trees to be tall. We need them to live. We need them to not be some of the trees elsewhere in Ardmore that we have discussed here before. And you know, all the plantings that may happen in the internal courtyards that only the residents of this project get. In the streets, we need to make sure and they actually work well. I probably more than most am sympathetic to the fact that our zoning code in the past has not always gotten it right. Right? It was a code that was written in the mid-2000s, right before a Great Recession, and a complete absence of new development for a decade, and it did not get play tested until now. And what we are seeing is that the recent developments don't quite work the way that necessarily everyone had intended way back when, and we need to adjust. And I'm glad we're having processes to do that. But I will say that the standard for that should not be it's better than a vacant lot, right? The standard for that is it as good as it could be in our township? And that's the standard that we should be aspiring to. And I look forward to seeing the evolution of this plan. I hope they can continue to work towards at least my aspect. The master planning process happened in the zoning code that we passed to make the future developments more sort of scale appropriate. Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Okay, anyone else? Let me just, Commissioner Zoll, I'm going to take you. I just want to see if there's anyone online, commissioners online who have anything to say. I see no hands up. So Commissioner Zoll, go ahead.
A moment ago, I spoke about transit-oriented development, which by definition, is sustainable development. Walkable to train. We've learned that we're going to get an extensive stormwater management system where none exists. That's sustainable. We've talked a lot tonight about greening standards, natural features code, a sidewalk that is inviting and green. That's sustainable. So sustainability is happening in this project. We have a capital improvement plan. A few weeks ago, we did a long workshop on it. The 6-year plan. I repeatedly say, find me another municipality that has a 6-year capital plan. Find a county that has a 6-year capital plan. The money from the rec fee is going to support what's in the capital plan. The capital plan already gets started improvements or replacement or the renovation of the Ardmore Avenue Community Center in the Palm. So we do have a plan for the rec fee funds. And we learned about MUST, and Commissioner Sinai described the timing quite well. It wasn't tested, but we did have some development under MUST. Doesn't exist anymore. We scrapped it over a year ago when we revised our zoning code in February of 2020. So we move forward with different zoning for our commercial district. Then I would like to make a comment for the developer. I did see in Micah Sneed's email, which I've just been reading, that this isn't going to, there's not going to be any work on the site for 18 months. Demo is not going to start until December of 2022. So if that is correct, I think we'd like to see the property owner maintain the property in the interim so that it doesn't look quite as bad as the photos that I saw in Micah Sneed's email. You know, transit-oriented development in near transit is the way the zoning code should work. This development doesn't belong anywhere else other than near transit in this township or anywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing no other commissioner comments, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. And if you're online, raise your hand. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I think it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you all who participated, staff and applicants, representatives tonight. So that, President Bernheim, concludes the Building and Planning Committee's business tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes. And before we conclude this evening, does anybody else have any other comments or messages of the general nature? Seeing none, then I will certainly, I thank everybody for their hard work this evening and wish you all a good night. We are hereby adjourned.